First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Saturday Night Live, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Second City, Upright Citizens Brigade, Comedy Bang Bang, Make Some Noise. These are just a few of the icons in the art of improvisation that bring me great joy in my life. If you have never had the pleasure of watching improv, I encourage you. Find a live or a filmed improv performance. Now, in theater, there's a script. It's already determined what the words are and the plot are, and everyone on stage and off stage has well rehearsed the blocking, the lighting, the set changes. Everyone knows exactly what they are going to do, or at least should, what everyone else on stage is going to do. And the art in theater is the magic of that live moment, the magic of executing it to perfection. When you go to see a touring Broadway show, it's that way. When you go to see a touring Broadway show at the Performing Arts Center, the folks on stage have done that show hundreds of times. You are basking in the polished shine of their expertise. You don't go to a production of Hamilton and go, oh, I wonder what happens at the end. You know the ending. You go to see how beautifully they tell the story. But in improv, it's anyone's guess. The performers do not know what they are going to say or do until they've said or done it. Now, they have some games, they have some frameworks to get the scene going. So the troupe might say to the audience, okay, we're going to create a sitcom scene based on suggestions from the audience of two famous people who would not normally be in the same room. And once they get a couple suggestions, off they go, leaping into the unknown together. They are co-creating the scene as they go. Is your heart rate already faster? There are thankfully a few rules to guide these improv performers. The most important and the most famous rule in improv is yes and. Yes and. Whatever it is that you offer on stage, I'm going to affirm it. I'm going to go with that, and then I'm going to add something to it, take it in a bold new direction. So if we're on stage together and you begin the scene by saying, it's so cold, I would kill the scene if I say, no, it's not. It's hot. Well, there's nowhere to go with that. Thanks, Steve. So instead, I need to give it a direction after that. If they say, yeah, it's so cold, I might say, yeah, I thought hell would be hot. And now we have a setting that gives my partner something to do with it. So maybe they want to flesh out who we are. Oh, Prince Andrew, I didn't realize there were royalty here. Or maybe they want to give us a why, like, I thought a whole lifetime in Doctors Without Borders, just that one plastic water bottle I drank, I didn't think that would be it. Whatever it is, away the scene goes. You're listening to your scene partner, you're affirming their choice, and then you're making another choice to move the scene forward. Improv is what I thought of when the Celebrant team and I met to discuss April and the Soul Matters theme, embracing possibility. To embrace, as in to warmly greet and engage with. Possibility, as in the recognition that there is more than one future outcome, that the future is not scripted or fated. To embrace possibility, to warmly engage with the reality that the future is not written, that we are not living in theater. We are living in improv. All 8 billion of us co-creating the scene as it goes. We are going, and heaven knows where we're going. But we know within, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we'll get there. But we know we will. That is a scary thought, right? Not knowing what's next. It would be comforting to have it scripted. We want to know what's next. We have within us two equally important motivations for the future. We have an approach motivation and an avoidance motivation. Approach motivation is our desire to pursue something for the possible rewards. I'm going to work hard at this application for this great job so that I can really move my career. I'm going to hike a little further into the woods into an unknown area because maybe there will be blueberries there. In contrast, avoidance motivation is our desire to stay away from threats. Let me save myself from the hurt that comes from being rejected for this job application. I'm going to stay on the familiar path because that unknown area might have bears. Bill's reflection was a story of avoidance and approach. To call Karen, what if she says no? And instead opted with, what if she says yes? Behold. Avoidance motivation keeps us alive. It protects our hearts, it protects our bodies, it conserves our energy. But approach motivation gives life its joy, its memories, its stories. It fills our hearts, it pleases our bodies, it gives us energy and purpose. We don't choose them equally, though, do we? When we are activated by the chaos and the threats of the world around us, by international wars, by legislative assaults in our state or our nation on our basic civil rights, by the unconstitutional occupation of our cities by an undertrained paramilitary, when we are threatened, when we are activated, we lean very hard into avoidance motivation. I just need to survive. We turn like winter, cold and hard. And yet here comes spring every year, warming up, although not last week, warming up, greening up, the sun a little bit longer every day, to remind us to embrace possibility and Easter, to shake things up, to say you don't know that that untrod path will have a bear. It's just as likely to have blueberries. There's a kind of optimism in this practice of embracing possibility, right? And it made me think of our December theme, choosing hope, because it almost sounds like synonyms: choose hope, embrace possibility. But the danger of hope is that it can be a passive feeling. Boy, I sure hope it warms up. You can't embrace possibilities passively. You have to get on stage. You got to jump into the scene. You got to participate in the unfolding scene. You have to yes and what you've been given. But when we think about choosing hope, at least I remember Joanna Macy's framework for active hope. And it's 3 simple steps. Step 1, acknowledge your present reality. This is what this is. 2, articulate the future you want to see. And then 3, take some steps in that direction. And I think that holds for embracing possibility as well. It's certainly the same step 1. This is my reality. Possibility only begins when you start telling the truth and accepting the reality that you are in. So in improv, there's a whole subset of improvisers that are good at improvising Shakespeare. Can you imagine that? What do you do for a living? I improvise Shakespeare. So let's suppose you're that person and you're really hoping that your scene partner gives you a softball. They say, "Oh, greetings, fair Hamlet. I pray thy journey was not intemperate." And you go, "Oh, I could do this all day." But what if instead she says, "I can't believe you scored us tickets to the World Cup final." And this is the moment when you realize, I'm not a soccer fan. I can't name any soccer players or which countries have a good soccer team. Well, that's the scene you're in, accept your reality. So maybe you're going to pivot with a context. "Oh, are you kidding? What a perfect 50th anniversary." And now you've given her somewhere to go. "Oh, now we're an elder couple that apparently loves global soccer." Accepting your reality. Maybe this was the candidate you hoped would win the last election, but this is the one that did. That's the scene you're in. Now what? If you're in an avoidance frame of mind, well, you pull up the drawbridge, you batten down the hatches, you stockpile, you endure, you survive. And I want to be clear, there are folks with marginalized identities for whom this is the only way through this next chapter. But for people who are not in immediate danger of illegal deportation, there's also an approach frame of mind. A call, if you will, to join more groups in your city, to talk with more neighbors, to read more books, to attend more events, to donate to more programs, to do more getting out the vote, whatever it is, to hike toward the blueberries that you do want to see in the world. To embrace the possibility that this script is not already completed, that we are writing it as we go together. Because if we don't accept the present reality, whatever your present reality is, you get stuck. I'm out of ideas for what to do. And that makes me think of a poem by Wendell Berry. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. When we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. There's not a great deal that historians of the ancient Near East do all agree on. But here's something that they do. About 2,000 years ago, there was, in fact, a man named Jesus of Nazareth who came from Galilee, started a movement, and was executed. Every Easter, I think a lot about his closest friends, what we call the disciples. Because according to the stories, they literally dropped whatever they were doing in that moment, left their homes, their families, their lives, their responsibilities, and just started following this 30-year-old. I think about how persuasive he must have been. Now, according to these stories, they watched Jesus perform miracle after miracle after miracle, literally changing lives. But more importantly, they heard him reframe their covenant with God from a public observance of the law into a private inner work into the spirit of the law, namely that we should, above all things, love one another. So when Jesus says, and according to the Gospel of Matthew 25, whatever you do to the least of these people, you do to me. Another way of framing that from their perspective is to say, well, we know that this guy is holy, and that means everyone is holy, or as Unitarians might say, everyone has inherent worth and dignity. I think about these disciples. I think about how their lives are transformed by this movement, a movement that starts as a trickle. Some nobody from nowhere and a few illiterate fishermen and a couple despicable tax collectors. And it swells into a torrent of a river that comes flowing into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. This radical idea that we should all help one another and clothe and feed and shelter and heal and care for one another, that's the approach mindset to the nth degree. It leads us to an immeasurably big field of blueberries, enough for everyone. Surely you could see the appeal, given that most people were very poor and living under a militaristic empire that bragged about how they would bomb their enemies back to the Stone Age, how the Persians were no match for this greatest army of lethal war fighters. I'm sorry, I got my stories jumbled for a minute there. Anyway, you can see the appeal of a flowing river of justice and peace and equity and compassion and generosity and love. And then the story of Jesus' life ends on Mount Golgotha on what we call Good Friday. And the forces of empire and domination execute a person for preaching liberation and love. So I think about his closest friends as I stood there watching him executed in the most deliberately painful way possible. This is not an impeded stream in this moment that sings, the mind that is baffled. No, this is a giant dam that just stops the river. It turns out that path did not have blueberries. It had a grizzly bear. The curtain falls, end scene. And I want to say that I think a lot of us have been in that moment. Our own version of Mount Golgotha, watching something that you care deeply about be publicly executed. I know I have. Your head races with thoughts, but you're unable to say a word. You feel your heartbeat in your eardrums more than your chest. You feel like you're on stage, not knowing the next line, because this is not where the script is supposed to go. I know the script. This is wrong. Stuck. The theologian Frederick Buechner writes, resurrection means that the worst thing is never the last thing. Resurrection means that the worst thing is never the last thing. Now, Unitarians and Universalists were historically Protestant Christians. They just were too Protestant for the Christians at some point. And so when they merged in the 1960s, we agreed to be a pluralistic, non-creedal association. That means that there are a range of opinions in this room. I want to be transparent. I don't think much about whether Jesus actually resurrected. But I also want to acknowledge that the accuracy of the claim that on the third day he rose again means a great deal to several billion Christians. And so I want to honor in my pluralism my respect for that belief for those. For my part, I tend to side with the biblical scholar John Dominic Crossan, who said, and I don't think this is the nicest way to say it, but I think he said, my point once again is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we're now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and we're now dumb enough to take them literally. I think he could have said that better. But I think what he means is that I read them for their truth, not for their veracity. I read the Gospels like I read the Odyssey or 100 Years of Solitude. Stories of remarkable wisdom and truth, not nonfiction. And so I come back to Jesus' friends standing there watching their leader die in agony. Surely, they must have thought, this is the end of the road. But Easter is the archetypal story of embracing possibility. Because in his defense, Jesus had very patiently explained to his disciples over and over, death will not be the end. You will see me in a few days. I am going to resurrect. This is part of the plan. But one of the many things that I love about the Gospels is how relatable the disciples are. They are so slow to understand him over and over. They've literally watched him raise another person from the dead, and still they take his death as the end of their story. And what happens in that moment of imperial violence? They're stuck. They hit avoidance mindset. They hide from the Romans because they do not want to suffer that same painful fate. Even after he visits them again, and I love this, Thomas goes, yeah, I don't really believe it, right? Even after that, finally they get their courage up and they pivot to an approach mindset. And so they go out and share his teachings of radical love and compassion and altruism. And we know that they did because the story lives on, even here 6,400 miles away from where that happened 2,000 years later. Resurrection means the worst thing is never the last thing. The veracity of his resurrection is not the important part of Easter to me. The important part is the radical embrace of possibility. Yes, I died. And here I am. This story's not finished. Over the last 8 months, I have been honored to sit with many of you in my office or in your living room or in your hospital room. I've heard the quiet, internal, deep pains that you carry. I know that many of us are hurting. I know that it feels for some of us like something in your life is dying on a cross. Maybe it's just a broader sense that democracy is taking its last breaths. Yes. And the story continues to be written, improvised by we the people, improvised in stunning networks of resilience and care and resistance in the Twin Cities this winter, because imperial violence looks the same whether it's in a face mask or a centurion helmet. But those teachings of discipleship, as Jesus would put it, would still also look the same. It still looks like tutoring a child, or feeding the unhoused, or helping the immigrant, or cleaning up and stewarding our world, or singing in a chorus of thousands who declare that justice is what love looks like in public. The story is not yet finished. We are writing it together. May we write it in love. Amen.